Slack radio. I'd rather be listening to Slack radio right now. Please.
Deep dive on PR Genius.
Have you ever been just out in public trying to, have a quiet moment and bam, someone's phone is just blasting a conversation on speaker?
Oh, absolutely. Or you walk into like this thick tension of an argument happening nearby.
Exactly. Or even just that general feeling, like the social fabric just feels a little thinner, a bit frayed.
Something just feels off.
Yeah, off. And it feels like we're constantly hearing it, too. People are just ruder these days. It feels true, but, what does that even mean? And is it always, rudeness?
Yeah.
Or could it be something else?
Well, that's what's so fascinating, isn't it? How widespread that feeling is. This idea that civility is declining, but then you try to pin down what rudeness actually is, and it becomes incredibly subjective, almost slippery.
Right.
So today, we're going to dive deep into that. Look at the psychology, the societal stuff behind why we feel this way, and crucially, the real-world impacts it has. And then, and this is where it gets really interesting, we're going to pivot completely. We'll introduce this really unique kind of countercultural viewpoint that basically sidesteps all these social codes. Not by being rude exactly, but by pursuing something they call slack.
Slack! Okay, I'm intrigued. So for you listening, this deep dive is going to give you a solid grasp on why we feel like rudeness is increasing and what the actual consequences are backed by research. And then we'll introduce you to this figure, J.R. Bob Dobbs, and the whole Church of the Subgenius thing, exploring how their idea of slackfulness, love that word, might be totally different from just being plain rude.
It's not just about understanding rude people. It's about looking at a philosophy that actively tries to avoid that label, simply by embracing slack.
So yeah, hopefully giving you some new ways to think about social interactions, maybe even your own.
Exactly. New lenses.
Okay, so let's unpack this feeling first. The sense that people are ruder. Is it just us grumbling, or is there actual proof? Because it really feels real.
It does. And you're right to ask. It's not just anecdotal. There's actually some compelling data. The Pew Research Center, they're a nonpartisan group, really solid researchers, did a big survey on this.
Pew. Okay, so what did they find?
Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, their findings suggest a really significant shift in how we see each other socially, especially after the whole COVID-19 upheaval. It seems to have changed things for a lot of people.
How many people are we talking?
Get this. Nearly half of U.S. adults, 47%, they believe public behavior is noticeably ruder now than before the pandemic.
Wow, nearly half.
And it's not just slightly ruder for many. A good chunk, 20%, said it's a lot ruder.
20% saying a lot ruder.
That's significant.
It really is. And compare that to only 9% who think people are actually more polite now. The trend in perception is pretty clearly negative.
Yeah, that's a stark difference. So people feel it's ruder. Are they actually seeing it often? Apparently, yes. The frequency is quite striking. About a third, 34%, said they almost always or often run into rude behavior when they're out and about.
A third? Often or always?
Yeah. And then another 46% said they sometimes see it.
Okay, so if you add that up, that's 80% of Americans seeing rude behavior somewhat regularly.
Exactly, 80%. So for the vast majority, this isn't some rare occurrence. It's part of their regular experience of being in public.
Yeah.
It points to a really pervasive feeling, a shift in the social landscape that's affecting almost everyone.
80%.
Yeah.
No wonder it feels like such a common conversation topic. But okay, that brings us back to the core question. What is rude? Because it feels like my rude might be your just Tuesday,
Precisely. And that's the absolute crux of it. The definition is deeply, deeply personal. Lizzie Post, from the Emily Post Institute, the big name in etiquette, she points this out.
Right, the etiquette people.
Yeah. She says what we see as rude is shaped so much by our own experiences, our upbringing, our preferences. Basically, you call something rude when it makes you feel offended or disrespected or just uncomfortable.
So it's about that internal feeling, that reaction.
It is. But the tricky part is everyone's internal rule book is different. So different, in fact, that navigating any shared space almost guarantees someone's rules are going to be broken, even accidentally. It's not just bad manners. It's often a clash of these deeply ingrained personal social codes.
A clash of codes. I like that. It's less about deliberate attack, maybe, and more about mismatched expectations.
Often, yes. Though academics try to put a bit more structure on it. Jennifer Lowe, he's a social psychologist, she defines rudeness more specifically. She talks about it as an action or comment meant to convey disrespect.
Ah, okay. Meant to. Intent matters there.
Yes, intent is key in her definition.
Okay.
And it usually violates some kind of social norm, a shared expectation of how people should behave. So it's a breach of that expectation.
Okay, but is the intent always clear? Because sometimes I honestly can't tell if someone meant to cut me off or if they were just, spacing out.
That is a critical point, and it leads to this idea of a spectrum of rudeness. Amy Irwin, who works in cognitive psychology, highlights this. You've got direct rudeness, like openly criticizing someone, really blunt.
Yeah, no mistaking that.
Right. But then you have passive or indirect rudeness, like the classic example, staring at your phone when someone's talking to you.
Ugh, yeah, that one.
The ambiguity of intent is huge there. Were they deliberately ignoring you, or just totally absorbed and genuinely didn't notice? How you interpret that often determines if you label it rude or just distracted, even if the feeling of being ignored is the same.
Right, the impact can be similar even if the intent wasn't malicious. So, okay, if we can't always agree on the definition, what specific things do people generally agree are unacceptable? Did the Pew survey ask about actual behaviors?
Oh yes, they got into the weeds. And this is where you really see that social contract being negotiated, but also where some lines seem pretty firm for most people.
Okay, lay some on me. What are the big no-nos?
Well, near the top, with overwhelming disapproval, smoking around others, 77% said that's rarely or never acceptable. Makes sense with health awareness.
Yeah, that feels pretty settled now.
And right up there with it, taking photos or videos of someone in public without asking first. 74% said rarely or never acceptable. That touches on really core feelings about privacy and consent.
Definitely. Those feel like clear boundaries for most. What else?
Then you get into things with strong disapproval, but maybe a little more wiggle room for some. Like bringing a child into a clearly adult-focused place. Think a bar or a really fancy restaurant. 69% said rarely, never okay.
Okay, I can see that. Respecting the vibe of the place.
Exactly. And visibly displaying swear words, like on a t-shirt, 66% found that unacceptable. And just straight up cursing loudly in public. 65% said rarely or never acceptable. It reflects this general desire for a certain level of public decorum, maybe protecting kids, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. But you said there was more divergence on some things. Where do opinions really split?
Right. This is where it gets murky, suggesting, like you said, a real-time societal renegotiation. Playing music out loud in public, think a speaker on the bus or trail. 59% say rarely, never. Okay, but look at this. 32%, nearly a third, say it's sometimes acceptable.
Wow. Okay, so a lot of people think it depends on the situation.
Seems like it. Context matters. And wearing headphones while talking to someone, maybe like a cashier or a barista, 57% disapprove, but 26% over a quarter say sometimes acceptable. Again, it's not a universal no. Intent, duration, situation. It all seems to factor in for a chunk of people.
Interesting. That headphone one feels very modern, tied to technology use.
It really does. And the most divided behavior on their list, bringing a pet, like a dog, into an indoor space that isn't explicitly pet-friendly, like a grocery store or a clothing shop.
Oh yeah, that's a hot topic.
Hugely divided. Only 45% say rarely, never acceptable. But 40% say sometimes acceptable, and another 14% say it's usually or always acceptable.
So basically, it's almost a 50-50 split on whether pets in stores are okay sometimes.
Pretty much. It really begs the question, doesn't it? Are we actively redrawing the lines around personal space, shared quiet, how technology fits in, even where our pets belong in public? These less defined areas are definitely breeding grounds for perceived rudeness and conflict.
It really feels like the rule book is being rewritten live, with lots of disagreement. And you mentioned demographics matter, too. It's not just what behavior, but who is judging it.
Absolutely. The survey dug into that, and the differences are quite revealing. It reinforces that idea of clashing internal codes. It's not just kids these days being lax, it's more complex.
So who sees things differently? Age seems like an obvious one.
Definitely the most pronounced difference. Older adults, especially 65 and up, are consistently more likely to find these behaviors unacceptable. Take cursing out loud. A whopping 89% of those 65 plus say it's unacceptable. But for adults under 30, only 38%.
89 versus 38? That's a huge gap.
Massive. It's like different planets of expectation. Same for visible swear words. 86% of older adults disapprove versus 42% of younger adults. Wearing headphones while talking, 76% versus 36%. It clearly shows very different norms being passed down or developed across generations. Intergenerational interactions must be minefields for misinterpretation.
Seriously. It explains a lot of friction, potentially. What
Yeah.
about other factors? Gender, income.
Gender shows some differences, usually smaller though. Women were slightly more likely than men to find 5 of the 8 behaviors rude. The biggest gap was taking photos, videos without consent. 78% of women versus 69% of men found it unacceptable. Suggests maybe different sensitivities around privacy or feeling vulnerable.
Okay, makes sense. And income.
Interesting patterns there. Generally, people in higher income households found more behaviors unacceptable, except for one, bringing kids into adult spaces. On that one, lower and middle income groups were actually more disapproving than higher income groups.
Huh. That's counterintuitive. Maybe different experiences with childcare access or different definitions of adult space.
Could be any number of things. It shows it's not a simple rich versus poor divide on etiquette. Social experience really shapes these boundaries in complex ways.
What about politics? Does that play a role? Seems like everything else does these days.
Surprisingly, no. The survey found no major differences based on political party affiliation. These feelings about public behavior seem to cut across those lines. It suggests these norms, or the violation of them, are rooted deeper in personal upbringing, culture, generation, rather than current political alignment.
That's actually kind of reassuring, that some things aren't split down party lines. So, okay, we have this feeling, the data backs it up, we see divisions in what people consider rude. But why? What's driving this perception of increased rudeness?
Researchers point to a few key factors. Lizzie Post talks about a crisis of attention.
A crisis of attention.
Yeah. Basically, we're so constantly bombarded by screens, notifications, digital demands. Our attention is fragmented. We become, as she puts it, less aware of each other. We don't pay as much attention to how our actions impact others.
Like we're all in our own little digital bubbles, bouncing off each other without really noticing.
That's a great way to put it. We might play a video loudly or ignore someone talking because we're just not fully present to the shared social space. It's passive rudeness born from distraction.
That resonates. What else?
Stress and overwhelm were huge factors. Christine Porras, she's a major researcher on civility at Georgetown, did a global survey. The #1 reason people gave for being rude: feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Ah, that makes total sense.
And think about recent years, the pandemic, economic stress, political polarization, just general negativity. It's put everyone on edge. People have shorter fuses, less bandwidth for the emotional labor that politeness often requires. Her research actually tracked a rise in bad customer behavior, linking it to this increased stress.
Yeah, when you're barely holding it together, maybe holding the door seems like too much effort. It's sad, but understandable.
It is. But here's a really interesting paradox in the Pew data. Despite all this perceived rudeness swirling around, the vast majority of Americans, 84%, say they personally find it easy to know what's appropriate in public.
Wait, really? Most people think they know the rules.
Yeah. Though, interestingly, younger adults and those with lower incomes found it slightly harder, but still, the overall number is high. It suggests most people feel confident in their own understanding of social norms.
Yeah. Everyone thinks they're okay, but it's other people who are the problem.
That seems to be the implication. This "it's not me, it's you" dynamic could actually fuel the perception of widespread rudeness.
Yeah.
We judge others against our own internal rulebook, which we believe is correct, and find them lacking.
Okay, that's a fascinating psychological wrinkle. Now, let's talk impact. You mentioned earlier that rudeness isn't just annoying, it has real consequences. You might think a small insult, a bit of dismissiveness, it's minor, right? But research from Carnegie Mellon suggests otherwise. They talk about outsized impacts.
Yes, this is where it gets quite serious, moving beyond just hurt feelings into cognitive effects. The CMU study is really important here. They found rudeness triggers negative emotions, sure, irritability, distress. But critically, it also narrows our perceptions and makes us prone to judgment biases.
Narrows our perceptions. How?
They specifically highlighted a bias called anchoring. That's our tendency to fixate or anchor on one piece of information, often the first thing we encounter, and let it disproportionately influence our decisions, even if it's irrelevant or misleading.
Okay, give me an example of anchoring, like in everyday life.
Sure. Think about negotiating a price. The first number thrown out, say the seller's high asking price for a car, can anchor your thinking. Even if you talk them down, that initial high number makes the final price seem like a better deal than it might objectively be, because you're comparing it to the anchor, not necessarily the car's true value or your budget.
Right, right. Okay, I get that. So how does rudeness cause anchoring?
The negative emotions triggered by rudeness seem to make our thinking more rigid, less flexible. We latch on to simple explanations or the most obvious piece of information because we're stressed or agitated. The lead researcher, Benjamin Cooper, put it starkly. Our work demonstrates how dangerous these seemingly minor behaviors can be.
Dangerous. How dangerous.
They used a medical simulation that's frankly chilling. Anesthesiology residents witnessed a rude interaction, a senior doctor yelling at someone else right before they had to diagnose a simulated patient.
Okay.
Those residents who witnessed the rudeness were significantly more likely to misdiagnose the patient. They anchored onto a suggestion of an allergic reaction mentioned earlier, instead of figuring out the real problem, which was internal bleeding.
Oh my God. So they gave the wrong treatment because of witnessing unrelated rudeness.
Exactly. It shows how these seemingly minor behaviors can have serious consequences, potentially even deadly ones in high-stakes fields.
Wow. That just completely reframes the whole issue. It's not just about being nice. It's about cognitive function, safety.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, if just witnessing rudeness can mess up a medical diagnosis. What are the unseen impacts in other critical areas? Legal decisions, financial planning, even just your own important life choices made under stress after a rude encounter. The cognitive toll is much bigger than we usually acknowledge.
Okay, that Carnegie Mellon study is sobering. The idea that everyday rudeness can have these massive, even fatal ripple effects really underscores the need for civility. But now, as promised, we're going to take a hard left turn, a complete pivot away from conventional etiquette and the problems of rudeness.
A very sharp pivot, yes.
We're diving into the world of J.R. Bob Dobbs. Now, Bob isn't just some character. He's basically the icon, the patron saint, maybe, of a whole counterculture. And his philosophy offers a radically different way to deal with societal pressures. One that might look like rudeness from the outside, but claims to be something else entirely, something slackful.
Exactly. Bob and the Church of the Subgenius offer a direct antithesis to everything we've just discussed about politeness, social norms, and the stress they create. Instead of trying harder to be polite, they advocate for letting go, for embracing the unconventional, even the absurd. It's a deliberate rejection of the pressure to conform.
So who is Bob? Visually, he's that kind of smirking, pipe-smoking guy you see in their materials, right? Taken from old 1950s clip art.
That's him. The quintessential image of the seemingly average yet deeply subversive mid-century American male. And his whole persona, his famous quote even, "I am the global village idiot." Quote, "It's all about provocatively embracing what society might dismiss or look down upon."
Being the idiot as a badge of honor?
In a way, yes. It's tied directly to the core philosophy, the pursuit of slack. This is the central concept for the Church of the Subgenius.
Okay, define slack for us. What does that mean in this context?
Slack signifies, well, freedom, basically. But specifically, freedom from unnecessary effort, from hassle, from work, from societal expectations. It's about ease, about getting what you want or need without struggle, without guilt, without consequences. It's that feeling of blissful effortlessness, of things just working out for you. If you just wanted to totally check out from all the obligations and just be a brat. That's the essence of slack.
Okay, I think I get the feeling. So, connecting this back, if the perceived rise in rudeness is partly due to stress and distraction, is slack like a deliberate response to that? A way to opt out of the stress by rejecting the rules that cause it?
That's a very insightful way to put it. Yes, slack can be seen as a radical coping mechanism,
Right.
a way to insulate oneself from the pressures of conformity, productivity, and even politeness, which can feel like a form of stressful labor.
And here's the key question for a deep dive. How does this pursuit of slack show up in ways that might look rude to someone who doesn't get the philosophy? Is it actually rude, or is it just slackful? Is there a difference?
That's the million-dollar question, or maybe the triple-your-money-back question in this case. From the subgenius viewpoint, actions driven by the pursuit of slack are generally not intended to be rude or disrespectful.
Okay, intent again.
Right. The intent is personal liberation. Freedom from social norms, from emotional labor, from having to care about things they see as pointless constraints. It's not about attacking someone else with rudeness. It's about achieving their own state of ease. If that pursuit happens to bump up against conventional notions of politeness, well, that's seen more as a byproduct, not the primary goal.
So the offense taken by others is kind of collateral damage in the war for personal slack?
You could frame it that way, perhaps a bit cynically. They might argue that damage is really just the other person's attachment to meaningless conventions. The focus is profoundly internal on the subgenius's own freedom, rather than on managing external perceptions according to the standard social contract.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Let's look at some of Bob's famous maxims. These quotes really capture the flavor. They often sound incredibly blunt, maybe even offensive on the surface, like, everyone here is stupid. Pretty harsh, right?
Yeah. Undeniably blunt. But within the subgenius context, it's not really about calling specific people dumb. It's more a blanket dismissal of intellectual pretense, of the pressure to always appear smart or informed according to conventional standards.
So it's like saying, let's all just drop the act.
Exactly. It levels the playing field. By declaring everyone stupid, Bob frees himself and his followers from the effort, the work, of constantly trying to prove their intelligence or conform to intellectual expectations. It's achieving mental slack by rejecting that specific game. It's not meant as a personal insult. It's a philosophical position against intellectual hierarchy.
Okay, how about this one? Act like a dumb shit and they'll treat you like an equal. That sounds manipulative, or like embracing incompetence.
It is, in a way, strategic incompetence for the sake of slack. It's a tactic. Deliberately underperform, seem less capable, so people lower their expectations of you. You avoid responsibility. You avoid being asked to do difficult things.
Less work, more slack.
Precisely. Or it could be a way to disarm people, to fit in by not seeming like a threat or overly ambitious. It's cynical, yes, but pragmatically aimed at reducing effort and increasing ease. Again, the goal isn't to insult others' intelligence, but to manage their expectations of you for your own benefit.
Then there's the indulgence angle. Don't just eat that hamburger, eat the hell out of it.
Sounds fun, but also of a total disregard for manners or maybe even health.
It's pure, unadulterated slack through sensory pleasure. It's about embracing enjoyment with gusto, without restraint, without worrying about table manners or what others think, or calorie counting. It's freedom from the self-imposed rules of polite or healthy consumption.
So you're not trying to gross out your dinner companion. You're just liberating yourself from even thinking about their judgment.
That's the idea. Fully immerse in the pleasure, attain slack from the mental burden of decorum.
Okay, and this one's intriguing. The stupider it looks, the more important it probably is. That seems to flip value on its head completely. It challenges conventional wisdom about what's valuable or serious. It suggests that true insight, or maybe just true slack, often lies hidden in things society dismisses as silly, trivial, or stupid. Embracing this frees you from chasing external validation or mainstream approval.
It's like finding profundity in the absurd.
Or at least finding slack by not caring about perceived profundity. It's about valuing unconventionality itself as a path to freedom.
So these are about rejecting conventional wisdom for liberation. What about ones that seem more directly confrontational or indifferent to causing offense? Like, fuck them if they can't take a joke. That sounds pretty aggressive.
The language is aggressive, no doubt. But again, within the philosophy, the primary intent isn't hostility. It's about prioritizing your own authentic expression, your sense of humor, over the potential sensitivities of others, especially those seen as overly serious or easily offended, the normals or pinks in their terminology.
So it's slack from self-censorship. Freedom to just say it.
Yes. It's a refusal to perform the emotional labor of constantly worrying about offending someone. It's radical honesty, or at least radical adherence to one's own impulses, even if it jars others. The focus is on the speaker's liberation, not the listener's comfort.
Okay, this next one feels complicated. I don't practice what I preach because I'm not the kind of person I'm preaching to. How does that square with being slackful versus just hypocritical or rude?
It's a very layered, satirical maxim that provides immense slack. It does a few things. It separates the speaker's actions from their pronouncements, acknowledging maybe self-interest or inconsistency. It's also a rejection of the burden of being a role model, of having to live up to your own ideals all the time.
So freedom from hypocrisy by just admitting you don't always follow your own advice.
Kind of. It allows for a contradictory, individualized existence, which is central to their idea of freedom. It's not meant to insult the listener, the kind of person I'm preaching to, so much as to playfully dismiss the expectation of moral consistency in the preacher. It frees Bob to be Bob, flaws and contradictions included.
It's like ultimate accountability avoidance, maybe. Okay, what about demands? Give me slack, food, money, a job, etc. Or kill me. That sounds extreme.
It is extreme. It's hyperbolic. It's framing basic needs or desires for slack in the most dramatic way possible to underscore their importance to the individual. It bypasses polite requests entirely.
Why? Just for shock value?
Partly, but it's also slack from the perceived inefficiency and insincerity of conventional niceties. Why beat around the bush? Just state the need in the most attention-grabbing way possible. It's theatrical assertion, not a literal threat.
Right. And eternal salvation, or triple your money back, taking something sacred and making it transactional.
Exactly. It demystifies and commodifies grand spiritual promises.
Yeah.
It provides slack from the weight of dogma, reverence, and unquestioning faith. By reducing salvation to an absurd money-back guarantee, it liberates the subgenius from the emotional and intellectual work of traditional belief systems. It's satire as liberation.
And simpler paths to ease. I'd rather be lucky than good any day.
That's pure slack preference. It champions effortless good fortune luck over the hard grind of practice, effort, and skill development being good. Why struggle when you can get lucky? It rejects the societal pressure to constantly strive and achieve through sheer effort.
Embrace the path of least resistance.
Whenever possible, yes.
Yeah.
That's peak slack.
And maybe the ultimate mind bender. I always lie and I'm always right. That just messes with logic itself.
It's a classic self-referential paradox, right? But the point isn't the logic puzzle. It's the liberation it offers. Freedom from objective truth, from consistency, from accountability. It allows the subgenius to construct their own reality and always feel justified within it.
So slack from ever being wrong.
It's essentially yes. It's not about deceiving others necessarily, but about embodying a philosophical stance where personal rightness trumps external truth. It's ultimate subjective freedom.
Okay, so pulling it all together. These maxims, they often challenge respect, sincerity, decorum, things we associate with not being rude. But from the subgenius angle, the intent isn't disrespect. The intent is slack, liberation from norms, effort, expectations. Any offense caused is just a side effect of prioritizing that freedom.
That is the crucial distinction they'd likely make, yes. Bob isn't portrayed as malicious. The philosophy isn't about targeting people to offend them. It's about radical self-focus and liberation. If that liberation clashes with your definition of politeness, that's seen as your issue, rooted in your attachment to puny human conventions, not Bob's problem. His actions are a performance of freedom, not an attack.
So it really boils down to, it's not about being rude to someone, it's about being true to your own pursuit of slack. And if that looks rude to outsiders, well, fuck them if they can't take a joke. Maybe.
That certainly captures a core element to the attitude, yes. It's an internally focused philosophy where the external impact on others' feelings is considered secondary or even irrelevant to the primary goal of achieving personal slack.
And this philosophy isn't just about social interaction. It extends to how Bob views reality itself, right? He's not just chaotic. There's a worldview underpinning the slack.
Absolutely. It's a distinct, often satirical, highly individualized perspective. Like his famous line about the veil of illusion. Someone asked if he wanted to see behind it, and he said, "Hell no. I'm interested in what's behind the veil of ordinary reality."
Meaning?
Meaning he's rejecting abstract, possibly phony spiritual quests for a deeper, maybe more cynical look at the weirdness and contradictions within everyday life itself. It's slack from chasing grand, elusive truths that don't offer immediate, tangible ease or freedom. Focus on the here and now, but question its assumptions.
And even his take on existence is filtered through this lens, like that diary entry.
Oh, the teenage diary entry is classic Bob. I choose to believe in an afterlife only because it is too horrible to believe that such a cool stud as myself could be allowed to disappear from the universe.
Hilarious. But also totally self-serving.
Exactly. It's humorous narcissism as existential coping. It gives him slack from deep philosophical angst or the demands of humility found in conventional religion. Belief is adopted purely because it serves his ego. He's not trying to convince anyone. He's just being Bob.
And finally that line, "Don't forgive them, for they know exactly what they do." That sounds pretty dark. A rejection of forgiveness.
It is cynical, certainly.
Yeah.
It dismisses the idea of naive forgiveness based on ignorance. It assumes people generally do know what they're doing when they cause harm.
And the slack in that is
Freedom from the emotional labor of empathy, of trying to understand the other person's perspective, of granting absolution. It's a self-protective stance. By assuming intent, you free yourself from the obligation to forgive, allowing for a more guarded, less emotionally draining approach to dealing with others' transgressions. It provides slack from the societal pressure to always turn the other cheek.
Okay, so we've got these two poles. On one side, the very real, measurable, sometimes serious consequences of perceived rudeness in society, impacting our thinking, our stress, our interactions. And on the other, this radical philosophy of slack championed by Bob Dobbs, where things that look rude might just be acts of personal liberation from those very societal pressures.
Exactly. Two very different ways of looking at social interaction and its friction points.
But it gets even more complicated, doesn't it? Because even outside of a specific philosophy like subgenius, our own personal definitions of rude are so varied, shaped by our history, our culture, the situation we're in. It's not just civility versus slack, it's a whole messy spectrum in between.
That's a critical point. The subjective nature of rudeness means our personal and cultural backgrounds create this incredibly complex tapestry of expectations. We often assume our norms are the norms, leading to constant, often unintentional clashes.
Like Lizzie Post said, we learn what's kosher from family and culture. I mean, think about simple things like how loud you talk at dinner or whether you eat in front of the TV. What's totally normal in one family might be seen as appallingly rude in another.
Absolutely. And if you interact with someone from a different cultural background, their baseline for polite conversation distance, eye contact, directness, it could all be completely different from yours, leading to misunderstandings where neither person intends offense, but offense is taken.
And we saw the generational gaps in the Pew data. That's huge. Younger people growing up with phones might see texting during a conversation differently, maybe even as efficient multitasking.
Right. Jennifer Lowe's study found Australian millennials viewed quick text responses as good manners, a sign you're engaged. Older generations might see any phone used during a face-to-face conversation as inherently rude, a sign of disrespect.
So it's not necessarily that manners are declining overall, but maybe that different sets of manners are evolving and clashing. The definitions themselves are shifting.
Precisely. And context is king, too. Burping loudly at a football game versus in a board meeting. Same action, wildly different interpretations based purely on the setting and its expected decorum. Misreading the context is a classic way to appear rude unintentionally.
And we tend to cut people we know more slack, right?
Yeah.
Ironically, using that word, if my best friend is short with me, I might assume they're having a bad day. If a stranger does it, rude.
Yes, relationship closeness acts as a huge buffer. We extend grace, assume positive intent more readily with people we trust. All of this complexity culture, generation, context, relationship, raises that crucial question. In a world where Slack actively rejects navigating these nuanced norms, how do we reconcile our own deeply ingrained ideas of politeness with the equally valid but different perspectives around us, especially when someone's pursuit of their Slack feels like a direct violation of our own code?
Yeah, where does personal freedom end and impacting others begin? Which brings us back to that core tension, intent versus impact. The subgenius might intend only slack, personal freedom, but behavior still has an impact, doesn't it? Like, if I'm pursuing my slack by, I don't know, loudly practicing my tuba on my balcony at 7 a.m. because it brings me joy, my intent is personal liberation and musical expression, but the impact on my sleeping neighbors is probably going to feel pretty rude. Does my pure intent matter to them when they're jolted awake?
That's the ethical tightrope, isn't it? This is where the philosophy of Slack, focused on individual liberation, crashes headfirst into the practical realities of communal living. Because the consequences of behavior, as the Carnegie Mellon study showed so clearly, are real.
Right, the cognitive impacts, the stress.
Exactly. Our brains and bodies react to perceived slights, to disruptions, to feeling disrespected, regardless of the perpetrator's inner philosophical state. The negative impact on mood, focus, and decision-making doesn't check whether the rudeness was intentional malice or just slackful indifference. The effect is often the same.
So even if the person isn't trying to be a rude person, if their actions stemming from their pursuit of slack cause genuine harm or distress, the negative outcome is still there. That's a really difficult knot to untangle. How do you, listening right now, navigate that? When does your need for freedom impose on someone else's need for peace or respect? Can it really be not rude, just slackful, if the impact feels deeply rude to the recipient?
It highlights that fundamental tension between radical individualism and the needs of a functioning society. Slack offers this tantalizing path to personal freedom, but society relies on a degree of predictability, shared norms, and mutual respect to operate smoothly, to build trust, to allow for cooperation. When individual slack, even without malice, consistently disrupts that, it can erode the social fabric, making life more stressful and less pleasant for everyone involved.
It makes me think about those mitigation strategies from the CMU study. Again, perspective taking and information elaboration. They were about managing the impact of rudeness. Could Slack itself be seen, maybe in a twisted way, as a form of radical information elaboration? Like deliberately pausing to discard all the conventional information about social rules?
That's a fascinating way to frame it. Provocative. You could argue, yes, that Slack is an extreme form of perspective distancing. Instead of trying to see another's perspective within the rules, you distance yourself entirely from the rules themselves, from the conventional perspective altogether. You're elaborating on the information by deciding most of it, the social norms, is irrelevant noise to be discarded in favor of personal ease.
So it is a cognitive strategy, just a very different one.
A very different one, with a very different goal. The CMU strategies aim to improve functioning within the existing social reality to make people more resilient and thoughtful participants. Slack aims to liberate the individual from that reality's constraints. It prioritizes personal freedom above the communal benefits of shared civility, which leads to that critical question for you to ponder. At what point does that radical individualism, even pursued non-maliciously as Slack, become counterproductive, undermining the very social stability and trust that, arguably, allows for individual freedom in the first place?
Okay, so this deep dive has taken us through the perception of rising rudeness, its very real cognitive and social costs, and then into the world of Slack as this radical alternative philosophy. Given all this, how do we move forward? How do we navigate this tension in our own lives? The Carnegie Mellon study offered some practical advice, right? Beyond just identifying the problem.
It did. They stressed that organizations, especially in those high-stakes fields we discussed, healthcare, aviation, finance, law, really need to actively work on reducing rudeness. Clear conduct codes, training, fostering a respectful culture. But they also suggested training individuals in those cognitive skills to buffer against rudeness when it does happen.
Right. Perspective taking and information elaboration. How can we actually use those day to day, not just in a hospital setting?
They're quite applicable generally. Perspective taking, when someone does something that feels rude, cuts you off, is dismissive. Actively try to imagine their situation, not to excuse it necessarily, but to understand potential reasons beyond malice. Maybe they're rushing to an emergency. Maybe they're incredibly stressed. Maybe they simply didn't see me.
So it's like creating a buffer against immediate anger by considering alternatives, depersonalizing it a bit.
Exactly. Can lessen the emotional sting and prevent that narrowing of your own perception. And information elaboration. Before reacting, especially to something ambiguous like a curt email or a short answer, pause. Ask yourself, what's the actual goal here? What information do I really need? Is their tone the crucial part, or is it a distraction? Focus on the objective, not just the emotional static.
It's about being more deliberate in our responses, not just reacting on impulse to the perceived slight.
Precisely. The study showed these small steps can make a big difference because, as we saw, small insults can have those outsized impacts. It's about building your own mental resilience to the inevitable friction of social life.
Okay, so that's about managing the impact. What about trying to reduce the friction itself? How do we break the cycle and maybe cultivate a bit more civility, less perceived rudeness overall?
Lizzie Post has some great advice here, really focusing on awareness and positive modeling. First, be really conscious of the behavior you're modeling for others. Kids, yes, but also colleagues, friends, everyone. Are you respectful? Are you present?
Checking our own behavior first. Always harder.
Isn't it just? And it's not just about don't do this, but explaining why courtesy matters, framing it as respect, empathy, building community, not just arbitrary rules. If you're always on your phone at dinner or snapping at service staff, that's the norm you're setting.
We teach by doing, basically. What else?
Leaders need to step up. Anyone in a position of influence, managers, coaches, teachers, even parents, needs to clearly set and consistently enforce expectations for respectful behavior. Don't just assume people know. Make the standards clear and uphold them.
Creates a shared understanding, a baseline.
Yes. And then personal self-reflection is key.
Right.
Regularly take stock. How are my interactions? Am I interrupting people? Am I truly listening? Am I mindful of service workers, especially under pressure? Identify your own patterns, your own triggers for impatience or dismissiveness, and actively work on being more mindful.
It's about taking personal responsibility for the energy we bring into shared spaces.
Beautifully put. And one more, slightly different tactic.
Yeah.
Actively notice and maybe even acknowledge polite behaviors you see.
Focus on the positive.
Yes, it's easy to get bogged down in the negative, the rude encounters.
Yeah.
But consciously spotting someone, holding a door, offering help, being patient, it reinforces that civility does exist, counteracts negativity bias, and might even inspire you to participate more actively in those positive exchanges.
I like that. Actively looking for the good. So Bringing it all home for you, our listener. What's the takeaway? Are we supposed to become Emily Post's disciples, hyper-aware of every potential slight? Or is there room for Bob Agdob's radical slack, that not rude, just slackful freedom from social obligation?
Well, this deep dive really highlights that spectrum, doesn't it? On one end, you have the clear psychological and social need for a baseline of civility. It affects our thinking, our well-being, our ability to cooperate. The data shows rudeness has real costs. On the other end, you have this compelling, if challenging, philosophy of slack, a deliberate rejection of those norms in favor of intense personal liberation. The challenge for you, listening, is to figure out where you land on that spectrum. Where are the boundaries? How aware are you of your impact on others? And can your pursuit of personal freedom coexist with respect for the shared social space?
It's about navigating that tension between your slack and someone else's potential perception of rude.
And understanding that both the need for civility and the desire for personal freedom are powerful human impulses. How you balance them is an ongoing personal negotiation.
So here's a final thought to chew on as you go about your week. In this stressed-out, distracted world where rudeness seems more common, how much of what you experience, or even what you dish out, is truly intended to offend? And how much might just be someone else's clumsy, maybe unconscious, maybe desperate grab for their own little piece of slack? That moment of freedom that to them feels necessary, even if it lands badly on you, simply because your internal rulebooks, your definitions of what matters, are just so different. That was a really deep dive. We covered a lot, from Pew Research data to the profound philosophy of J.R. Bob Dobbs. Huge thanks for exploring the nuances of rudeness, its impact, and the challenging idea of slack with us.
Yeah, thanks for digging in. Remember, just understanding these different perspectives, from formal etiquette all the way to radical slack, gives you more tools, more empathy, hopefully, to navigate the complex social world around you.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep your eyes open for those moments of insight. Or maybe just moments of slack. Slack Radio.
Deep dive on PR Genius.